Welcome to Faith Wonders, where real stories of faith and miracles come alive from around the world.
The bells of Warsaw had not rung for weeks. What once called the faithful to prayer now hung silent, twisted and blackened by smoke. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of gunpowder, burning wood, and something deeper, something like despair itself. Father Andre stood by the window of the seminary chapel, his hands trembling as he clutched a small rosary worn smooth by years of prayer. Outside, the world he knew was ending. Fields that once shimmered with wheat were now streaked with craters and fire. He whispered to himself, "Ave Maria, ora pro nobis." But even as he prayed, the ground shook. Somewhere beyond the trees, tanks crawled closer, their engines growling like beasts awakened from hell. On the altar before him stood three things: a crucifix blackened by candle smoke, a statue of Our Lady of Fatima, white and pure, and a golden chalice. Not just any chalice. It was the one blessed and used by St. John Paul II when he came to Ukraine in 2001. A relic of hope, of peace, of unity. To Father Andre, it was the heart of the seminary itself. He remembered his mentor telling him, "This chalice carries not only wine, but the prayers of a nation." Now that nation was being torn apart. He turned toward the statue of Our Lady. Dust and light played across her cracked porcelain face. Her eyes, though only painted, seemed alive with sorrow. The flicker of a candle caught her tear-streaked cheek. For a heartbeat, Father Andre thought he saw moisture glisten there. Outside, the echo of artillery drew closer. Inside, silence grew heavier. He fell to his knees. "Mother of God, protect us," he prayed, voice breaking. "Protect your children."
The doors of the chapel creaked. Sister Teresa entered quietly, her habit smudged with ash. She held a small bundle of bread, perhaps their last meal. "They're coming," she said softly. "The soldiers." Father Andre looked up, eyes hollow but determined. "Then we stay with her," he said, glancing at the statue. "If they take everything else, we keep the faith." A sudden blast shook the walls. The candles trembled, shadows shivered across the Virgin's face. Then, something impossible happened. The air grew still. The candle flames straightened, unmoving. And for just one moment, a faint glow emanated from the statue's heart, soft, blue, and sorrowful. Sister Teresa gasped. Father Andre froze. Then the light vanished. "Did you see that?" she whispered. He nodded slowly, his breath shallow. "The mother weeps for her children." Minutes later, the first Russian convoy rolled into the village. The sound of boots on cobblestone echoed like thunder. The soldiers fanned out, shouting in rough voices, dragging open doors, searching for gold, for food, for anything worth taking. Father Andre carried the chalice to a hidden alcove behind the altar, wrapping it in linen. Sister Teresa clutched the small statue of Fatima, pressing it to her heart. "We cannot let them profane it." But the noise outside grew louder. Wood splintered, glass shattered. The chapel door burst open.
A figure stepped inside, a man in a dark uniform, his rifle slung over one shoulder, his face hard, unreadable. Behind him, 5 soldiers followed, their laughter coarse and cruel. Father Andre stood his ground. "This is a house of God," he said firmly. The officer smirked. "Then where is your God now, Father?" No one answered. Only the echo of his boots filled the sacred space. He looked around, at the crucifix, at the Virgin, at the chalice glimmering faintly beneath the cloth. "Take everything," he ordered in Russian. "Gold, silver, anything worth keeping." They began to strip the altar, their rough hands scraping marble and tearing linens. One soldier reached for the statue of Fatima. Sister Teresa tried to stop him. "Please, she is the Mother of God." The man laughed. "Then she can watch from heaven." Father Andre shouted, "No!" But it was too late. The soldier slammed his rifle butt against the statue. Porcelain shattered across the floor. A sound filled the chapel. Not the sound of stone, not of glass, but something deeper, like a sigh, like grief itself. Every candle in the room went out at once. The soldiers froze. For a single second, the only light came from the crucifix above the altar, its bronze figure glowing faintly red as if lit from within. Then darkness swallowed the chapel. Father Andre felt cold air rush through the room, though every door was closed. Sister Teresa clutched her rosary, whispering the prayer through trembling lips. When the lights returned, only one thing had changed. On the floor, among the shards of the statue, there was blood. A single drop, dark and real, glistening in the dust. Father Andre fell silent. The soldiers stared, uneasy. The captain, Mikhail Orlov, spat on the ground. Superstition, just red paint. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. He grabbed the chalice. "Take it," he barked. "It'll fetch a good price." Then he turned to leave, but for a moment, just a moment, he felt something unseen grip his wrist. He yanked free, cursing under his breath. Behind him, the broken statue lay in silence. The face of the Virgin Mary, though cracked in two, seemed to smile. And as the convoy rolled away from the ruined seminary, thunder roared over Wurzel, though the sky was clear. The storm had begun.
The convoy rolled through the forest like a serpent of steel. Tanks crushed the birch branches beneath their weight. Trucks groaned, engines howled. The air carried a stench of diesel and smoke, an anthem of conquest. Inside one of the armored trucks, Captain Mikhail Orlov sat silent, staring at the golden chalice resting in his lap. He hadn't spoken a word since leaving the ruined seminary. Around him, his men drank, cursed, and laughed, but he remained still, haunted by the image of that single drop of blood. He told himself it was paint. He told himself it meant nothing. And yet, he could still feel the invisible hand that had gripped his wrist. As the sun sank behind the trees, Mikhail lifted the chalice, turning it toward the dying light. It glimmered faintly, too faintly. The reflection inside was wrong. Instead of his face, he saw the outline of the broken statue, the Virgin's cracked smile. He blinked. It was gone. He muttered a curse and shoved the chalice into his bag. Outside, the forest gave way to the smoking ruins of another village. They stopped to rest. The men built a fire, tore open rations, and poured stolen wine into tin cups. One of them, young, nervous, barely 20, watched the captain closely. "What's that thing you took, sir?" he asked. Mikhail glanced at him coldly. "A souvenir." "Looks like something holy." Mikhail snorted. "Holy things don't bleed." The soldiers laughed, but the young man didn't. His eyes drifted toward the captain's bag. He swore he saw a faint red glow from within. When night came, the laughter died. One by one, the men fell asleep. Only Mikhail remained awake, staring into the flames. The wind shifted, the fire hissed, flickered, and for a moment he thought he heard whispers, soft, feminine, like a prayer spoken just beyond hearing.
He turned sharply. No one was there. The forest was utterly still. He looked down at the chalice again. His hands trembled as he lifted it, half expecting another illusion, but this time something was inside. A thin film of liquid shimmered at the bottom. It should have been wine. It wasn't. It was red, dark, thick. He stared at it, horrified, and then poured it out onto the ground. The liquid soaked into the soil, steaming faintly. He rubbed his eyes, muttering, "I'm tired. I'm losing my mind." Then came the voice. Not loud, not booming, just present. A man's voice, deep, sorrowful, filled with authority. "Return what is sacred, Mikhail Orlov." Mikhail froze. He knew that voice. He had heard it once years ago during his youth, Pope John Paul II speaking of peace and forgiveness. He spun around, rifle ready. But there was no one. Only the whisper of wind through the trees, and somewhere, faintly, a bell ringing from far away. The next morning, one of the soldiers was dead. His face pale, eyes wide open, blood trickling from his nose and ears. No one could explain it. There were no wounds, no signs of struggle. "Heart failure," someone muttered. Mikhail said nothing. He buried the body himself, though he didn't know why. Before covering the man's face, he noticed something in the soldier's stiff hand, a piece of porcelain shaped like the edge of a virgin's veil. That night, Mikhail could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the statue of the Virgin Fatima, standing whole again, her face radiant, her eyes weeping light. Behind her, the shadow of a man knelt in fire, clutching a chalice that bled. He woke, screaming. The others pretended not to hear. For the rest of their march, the soldiers avoided him. They whispered that the captain was cursed, that he carried something not of this world. Even his own reflection seemed to avoid him. Mirrors cracked and metal warped when he drew near. When they reached the abandoned farmhouse where they were to rest, Mikhail locked himself in a room and set the chalice on the table. The morning sun filtered through the window, striking it with a dull glow. He poured wine into it, half in defiance, half in fear. Then he lifted it to his lips. The taste was not of wine. It was of iron. It was blood. He spat it out, coughing violently. When he looked back into the chalice, it was empty, but when he turned the cup over, blood dripped from its rim, slowly, endlessly, until the table was slick and red. Panicking, he dropped it. The chalice hit the floor, ringing like a bell. The sound was pure, high, echoing far longer than it should have. And when it finally faded, he heard her voice, soft, gentle, sorrowful. "You broke my image, and now you carry my pain." Mikhail fell to his knees. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the voice was inside him now, echoing through bone, through blood, through every beat of his heart.
Outside, a storm began to rise, though the sky was cloudless. Thunder rumbled without rain. Somewhere, a single bell began to toll. The same bell that had not rung since Vorzel.
The wind carried the scent of ash and rain across the valley of Vorzel. For days the skies had wept without reason, though no storm was seen. Inside the half-ruined seminary, Sister Teresa knelt before what remained of the chapel altar. The marble was cracked, the roof open to the heavens, and the statue of the Virgin, her beloved Fatima, lay shattered in silence. She whispered the rosary through trembling lips. Each bead she touched felt colder than the one before. When the final prayer left her mouth, the wind stopped. The candles, what few remained, flickered once, then steadied. And from the broken statue, a sound came. Drip, drip, slow, rhythmic, alive. Teresa turned her head. A single droplet slid down the Virgin's fractured cheek. It was not rainwater. It was blood. Her breath caught. She crawled closer, heart hammering in her chest. The droplet fell onto her palm, warm, impossibly fresh. And then she heard it, a whisper so faint it could have been the echo of her own heartbeat. Find him. She froze. Who, Holy Mother? Silence. Only the faint toll of a distant bell.
Meanwhile, miles away, Captain Mikhail Orlov rode in the back of the truck, head buried in his hands. His soldiers avoided him. Some crossed themselves when he passed, others murmured prayers. The air around him seemed colder. Even the flies refused to come near. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same vision. The Virgin standing amidst fire, her face bleeding light, and always that same voice. You broke my image, and now you carry my pain. At first, he tried to silence it with vodka, then with rage, then with prayer. But prayer only made the whispers louder. Back in Vorzel, Sister Teresa placed the bleeding fragment of porcelain inside a white cloth. She pressed it to her chest and rose to her feet. The chapel was dim, yet a pale glow lingered around the altar. She looked up and gasped. The missing pieces of the Virgin statue were gone, taken. All that remained was the pedestal, darkened by soot and blood. She fell to her knees, tears welling in her eyes. Mother of mercy, tell me what to do. The answer came not in words, but in sound. The church bell rang, once, twice, then again. But the bell tower had been destroyed months ago. She stepped outside. The wind was still. The forest whispered faintly. And through the trees in the distance, she saw it. A faint red shimmer, moving, pulsing. She clutched her rosary tighter and began to walk.
That same night, Mikhail awoke to find the chalice glowing faintly beside him. The red light pulsed like a heartbeat. He reached out to touch it, but the metal burned his fingers. Then came the voice again, closer this time, right beside his ear. She searches for you. He turned sharply, rifle raised. No one. Only the wind whispering through the broken shutters. He stared back at the chalice. Something moved within it. A shape. A face. For a heartbeat, he saw her, Sister Teresa, kneeling in the ruined chapel, clutching the same porcelain shard he'd stolen from the statue. Her lips moved in silent prayer. And as she whispered, blood began to rise from the chalice, slowly like smoke under water, forming letters that glowed with impossible light. Return to where it began. The light burst, the chalice cracked. Mikhail stumbled back, gasping. His hands were shaking, his eyes wide with terror. And yet, beneath that terror, a strange calm. He knew where he had to go. Dawn crept over the ruins of Vorzel as Sister Teresa reached the old crossroads leading to the forest. The air smelled of iron and rain. In her hands, she carried the wrapped porcelain piece. In her heart, a growing certainty. Somewhere beyond those trees, a man carried the rest of the Virgin's pain, and God, or something else, was leading them to each other. She made the sign of the cross and whispered, "Holy Mother, let me be your witness." The forest answered with a single sound, the distant roar of an engine, and a voice, hoarse and trembling, calling her name. Night fell heavy over the abandoned outpost. The wind hissed through the broken windows like a serpent whispering secrets. Inside, Captain Mikhail Orlov sat alone at a table, his eyes fixed on the golden chalice glinting under the pale glow of his lantern. He had cleaned it carefully, almost reverently. The ornate cup shimmered even in the dark, its edges still marked by the faintest trace of soot and blood. To the men, it was nothing but loot. To Mikhail, it was proof that no God watched over this forsaken land. If God existed, he would have stopped him. He raised his bottle, poured vodka into the chalice, and drank. The metal was cold against his lips, the liquid burned down his throat, and for a moment there was peace. Then came the voice, "Return what is sacred, or darkness will claim your soul." Mikhail froze. He looked up, heart pounding. Before him stood a man cloaked in light, his face familiar, lined with the weight of compassion and sorrow. The eyes, gentle yet piercing, shone with impossible mercy. Pope John Paul II. The room trembled, the lantern flickered violently. "You desecrated what was consecrated. You stole what was sanctified. Return it, Mikhail, before it consumes you." The captain's breath came in shallow gasps. He blinked, and the vision was gone. Only silence, only the soft creak of the walls, the moan of the wind. He exhaled, forcing a laugh. "Hallucinations," he muttered. "Just dreams and ghosts." He lifted the chalice again, but this time, as he tilted it toward his mouth, the liquid inside had changed. No longer clear, no longer vodka. It was red, thick, slow, alive. Blood. He dropped the cup. It clanged against the floor, spilling across the wooden boards in a spreading crimson pool. But as it touched his boots, it vanished, absorbed, as if the earth itself had drunk it. He stared, shaking. Then, slowly, he began to laugh again, hollow, cracked, desperate. If this is punishment, then show me more, God. Show me you still care. That night, sleep did not come. Every time Mikhail closed his eyes, he saw the Pope again, standing in a ruined church, holding the same chalice, now gleaming with red light. Behind him stood the Virgin Fatima, her face veiled, her eyes weeping tears of fire. "The chalice is not yours," the Pope said. "It carries what men cannot bear, the sorrow of the mother." When Mikhail awoke, his hands were covered in blood. He rushed to the mirror. No wounds, but his eyes were bleeding. By dawn, the camp was silent. His men found him kneeling before the chalice, whispering prayers in a language none recognized. His face pale, lips cracked, eyes hollow. "Captain, are you all right?" one asked. Mikhail turned slowly. There was blood dried beneath his eyelids, streaking down his cheeks like tears. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. "Hear what?" He lifted the chalice. From within came a faint sound, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. The soldiers backed away. One crossed himself, another ran, but Mikhail only smiled. "The Holy Mother speaks to me," he said softly. "She forgives me." He pressed the chalice to his chest, and for a moment the heartbeat stopped. Then came a scream, his own, rising from deep within as the metal seared into his flesh, glowing red hot. The smell of burning skin filled the air. When they finally tore the chalice from his hands, the captain lay on the ground, trembling, whispering words no one could understand. The soldiers buried the cup under rubble that same night, but none of them could sleep, because even through the soil, even through the stone, they could still hear it. Thump, thump, thump. Far away, in the ruins of the seminary, Sister Teresa awoke from her prayer. She had seen everything through her dream: the Pope, the blood, the chalice, the burning man. And in the silence of dawn, a voice came again, soft, sorrowful, divine. "He has drunk from my tears. Now he must face the truth." Teresa wept. The miracle had begun. By dawn, the camp was silent. His men found him kneeling before the chalice, whispering prayers in a language none recognized. His face pale, lips cracked, eyes hollow. "Captain, are you all right?" one asked. Mikhail turned slowly. There was blood dried beneath his eyelids, streaking down his cheeks like tears. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. "Hear what?" He lifted the chalice. From within came a faint sound, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. The soldiers backed away. One crossed himself, another ran, but Mikhail only smiled. "The Holy Mother speaks to me," he said softly. "She forgives me." He pressed the chalice to his chest, and for a moment the heartbeat stopped. Then came a scream, his own, rising from deep within as the metal seared into his flesh, glowing red hot. The smell of burning skin filled the air.
When they finally tore the chalice from his hands, the captain lay on the ground, trembling, whispering words no one could understand. The soldiers buried the cup under rubble that same night, but none of them could sleep, because even through the soil, even through the stone, they could still hear it. Thump, thump, thump. Far away, in the ruins of the seminary, Sister Teresa awoke from her prayer. She had seen everything through her dream: the Pope, the blood, the chalice, the burning man. And in the silence of dawn, a voice came again, soft, sorrowful, divine. He has drunk from my tears. Now he must face the truth. Teresa wept. The miracle had begun. The war had moved on. Vorezl was silent once more, its ashes cold, its echoes faint. Weeks had passed since the soldiers left, leaving behind only ruins, broken glass, and the faint scent of smoke that never seemed to fade. And yet, something was changing. It began with whispers. A farmer passing by the seminary claimed he'd seen light, soft, golden, pulsing from within the shattered chapel walls. At first, no one believed him. But on the second night, the light returned. And by the third, the whole village saw it. At dawn, the people of Vorezl gathered. Old women clutching rosaries, children carrying wilted flowers, men still wearing the dust from the front lines. They stepped through the broken gates of the Sacred Heart Seminary, the place that once stood proud, now little more than a grave of stones. Silence. Only the wind moving through the hollow corridors, whispering prayers of the dead. Then, from within the rubble of the chapel, a child gasped, "Look!" Beneath the fractured pedestal where the statue of Our Lady of Fatima had been destroyed, a single white flower had sprouted, small, fragile, its petals clean and luminous against the gray ash. The crowd knelt instinctively. Tears streamed down wrinkled faces. One woman whispered, "A sign. She has not left us." They began to pray, softly at first, then louder, stronger, the voices weaving through the ruins like a hymn reborn from dust. As their words filled the air, the ground trembled faintly. A crack split through the pedestal, and from that fracture came light. It was not the light of fire or the sun. It was softer, purer, pale gold tinged with blue, flowing out like water through stone. It rose, spiraled, and formed a shape suspended in the air before them. A heart, glowing, beating, alive. The people fell to their knees as the vision grew brighter, the air filled with the scent of roses. And then, as if carried by the wind itself, a voice echoed through the ruins, gentle, sorrowful, and filled with love. "My heart has never left this land. Even when my image was broken, my mercy remains." A cry went up among the people. The heart of Fatima, the heart of the mother. Word spread like wildfire. From Vorezl to Kiev, from village to city, from radio to rumor. They saw her light. The mother has returned. Miracle in the ruins. Pilgrims began to arrive, first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They came on foot, through mud and rain, carrying candles, pictures, and tears. And in the center of it all,
The little white flower still bloomed, untouched, unfading, surrounded by light that never dimmed. Among the crowd, Sister Teresa watched in silence. She held the fragment of the statue she had kept wrapped in cloth, the Virgin's right hand. When she placed it near the glowing heart, the light flared, brighter than ever before. A shape emerged within it, the face of the Virgin, serene and weeping, her eyes shining with forgiveness. And in that light, for just a heartbeat, Teresa saw him, Mikhail. He was kneeling beside the chalice, his face calm, his eyes no longer bleeding, but filled with peace. He raised his hands as if in prayer, whispering words she could not hear. Then, like smoke in sunlight, he faded. The chalice appeared beside the flower, clean, whole, gleaming gold. The curse had been broken. Through blood, mercy had returned. The crowd fell silent. A priest stepped forward, his voice trembling. "This is the heart of Fatima, the sign of forgiveness for a land in pain." He lifted the chalice. It shimmered under the morning light. The reflection within it was not his face, but hers. And so it began. Where war had brought ruin, faith brought renewal. Where blood had been spilled, light now flowed. But deep beneath the soil, in the shadowed crypts of the seminary, a faint heartbeat could still be heard. Thump, thump, thump. Some say it was the echo of the miracle. Others whispered it was the soul of the man who had broken the sacred and paid the price. But those who truly believed knew the truth. It was the heart of the mother, still beating for her children.
He could no longer tell where the nightmares ended and the waking began. For Mikhail Orlov, sleep had become a battlefield of its own. Each night he heard them, voices of women, soft and unending, whispering in Latin through the dark. Sometimes they prayed, sometimes they wept, and sometimes they called his name. "Mikhail, return what is sacred." He'd wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, the echo of their chant still circling the room like invisible smoke. And always the chalice stood there, on the table, glimmering faintly, waiting. One night, the whispers grew louder. He stumbled from his cot, reaching for his gun. The sound came from outside the tent, a low, steady murmur, almost like prayer. He followed it into the forest, through the mist, until he found a clearing. There, kneeling in the darkness, was one of his soldiers, Private Ivanov, his hands clasped in front of him, lips moving feverishly. "Mikhail," he whispered without opening his eyes. "She's here." "Who?" Ivanov's eyes snapped open. They were white, the pupils gone. "The lady in light." Before Mikhail could speak, the soldier's body convulsed. A scream tore from his throat, raw and animal, as his skin blistered, darkened, burned. The smell of smoke filled the air. Then silence. When the others found them at dawn, Ivanov's face was blackened, his features melted beyond recognition. But around his neck hung a rosary, untouched by flame. The men began to desert, one by one. They whispered that the captain was cursed, that the stolen chalice had damned them all. Even the bravest refused to sleep near him. At night, they could hear the faint sound of bells ringing from the direction of Vorsel, though the bell tower had been destroyed long ago. Mikhail tried to ignore it. He drank, he prayed, he cursed. But the bells would not stop.
Finally, he made his decision. He wrapped the chalice in an old cloth and rode alone to a forgotten corner of Kiev, where the black market thrived in shadow. There, behind rows of stolen icons and weapons, he met the buyer, an old man, hooded, his face hidden by candlelight. The man's eyes gleamed like mirrors. Mikhail set the chalice down. "I don't care what you do with it. I just want it gone." The old man studied it silently, his hands trembling slightly as he brushed the rim. Then, in a voice low and sorrowful, he said, "This chalice belongs to God, not to man."
Mikhail froze. How do you... But the man was gone. The candle still flickered, the smoke still rose, but the chair before him was empty. Only the chalice remained. That night, the whispers returned, louder, closer. They no longer came from the darkness. They came from inside the chalice. He placed his ear near it and heard a voice, not the soft weeping of the women this time, but a single, calm, familiar voice. "You cannot sell what was never yours." The chalice vibrated softly. The metal was warm, beating like a pulse. Mikhail screamed and hurled it against the wall, but instead of shattering, it rolled across the floor and came to rest at his feet, glinting under the moonlight. And as he stared into its hollow center, he saw his own reflection. His eyes hollow, his skin pale, and behind him, the faint outline of a woman in white, her hands clasped in prayer, her gaze filled with infinite sorrow. Return what is sacred before it returns to take you. Mikhail fell to his knees, trembling. He clutched his head, screaming into the empty room, "Leave me alone! What do you want from me?" The answer came not in words, but in sound. A single church bell tolling through the night. Dong. Once. Twice. Thrice. Then silence. Mikhail wept. He knew what it meant. It was time to confess.
The storm rolled over Kiev like a dying beast, its growl echoing across the sky. In the back of an abandoned truck, Captain Mikhail Orlov knelt, clutching the sacred chalice. His hands shook, his face pale as ash. He had tried to bury it, sell it, destroy it, but it always returned, like a wound that refused to heal. Tonight, he would end it. He followed the sound of bells through the forest, bells that should not exist. The trees bent with the wind, whispering his name. His boots sunk into the mud, leaving a trail of blood where there should have been only earth. When he reached the clearing, the moon broke through the clouds, casting its pale light on a ruined church. Its doors hung open. Inside, the shadows moved like living things. Mikhail stepped in.
The altar was gone, the icons shattered. Only a single candle flickered at the far end, its flame trembling. Beneath it stood a woman in a gray cloak. Sister Teresa. She turned slowly, her face calm, her eyes filled with both sorrow and pity. "Mikhail," she said softly. He froze. "How do you know my name?" He fell to his knees. "I didn't mean to. I thought it was just stone and gold, not holy." Tears cut through the dirt on his cheeks. Teresa approached him slowly, reverently, as one might approach a wounded child. "The mother still waits for you, but not for long."
He lifted the chalice between them. "Take it, I beg you." But Teresa didn't move. "It is not me you must return it to." Mikhail's breath caught. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed the church. Then a faint glow began to rise from the chalice itself. It spilled over his hands, over the floor, painting the cracked walls with light. And from that light, a figure emerged. The Virgin Fatima. Her face was veiled, her eyes weeping light instead of tears. Her hands, open, reached toward him. Mikhail's heart pounded. He dropped to the ground, sobbing, "Forgive me." Her voice came like wind through a broken bell. "You sought power, but found pain, and still my mercy waits." She raised her hands. The chalice lifted from the ground, floating between them, glowing brighter, brighter, until Mikhail screamed as light poured into him, through him. Flashes filled his mind. The day he broke the statue, the faces of the dead, the voice of the Pope, the whispers, and the blood. And at the center of it all, the heart of Fatima, beating, calling him home.
When Sister Teresa opened her eyes, the light was gone. The church was silent again. Only ashes and smoke. In the center of the floor lay the chalice, untouched, shining as if newly made. Mikhail was nowhere to be found. But on the wall behind the altar, scorched into the blackened stone, were the words, "Forgive me, Mother." Teresa fell to her knees and wept. Months later, the war had shifted. The smoke over Ukraine began to clear. And from Rome, the Holy Father arrived. He walked the path of ruins to the Sacred Heart Seminary, where the chalice awaited him, still gleaming, still warm to the touch. During Mass, sunlight broke through the shattered window and struck the cup. For a moment, the congregation gasped. Within the golden reflection, they saw her, the Virgin of Fatima, smiling, her eyes radiant with mercy. The Pope whispered, "Faith was not destroyed that day. It was reborn from the ashes." And so the story of Warsaw passed into legend. Some called it madness, others a miracle. But those who truly believed said they could still hear the bells ringing on quiet nights and the faint heartbeat beneath the earth, the heart of the mother, still beating for her children.